Hi, my name is Letitia. I was a fashion student graduating this year. I'm 22 years old and I currently work as a copywriter. Okay, so the first thing I would say is comparison. It has become very, very easy for us to compare ourselves to each other. We're constantly on social media where we're seeing everybody live out their lives, and with the nature of social media, you're always portraying, the good side of life. So it becomes hard to be proud of yourself because you see your whole life. You see the good, the bad, and it balances out. But when you're looking at others, you're just seeing the good. So it becomes very hard to be proud of yourself because you think that everybody is living a good life, whereas you're not. The second thing, I guess, is society and their attitude towards gratification. In this generation, we see young people doing things like big things so like early, and it seems like it's so easy. And for us, we're like, okay, we're young too, we're able to, so we should be just like them. But in these cases, it's like, sometimes you're not meant to, sometimes it's not your path. And when you have this one, defining, how do I put it, example of what success is, and you don't fit into that, it becomes very hard to be proud of yourself. I would say, especially when it comes to trends, I feel like society has this way of pushing out trends of how people are supposed to live. I would say the first one that comes to mind right now is the soft life one. Right now, that's the prevailing one now, where it's like everyone has to live a life where everything is fun, and you're not going through hardships. Like you're not hustling. You're hustling just enough to make enough money to do all these big things, but you're just how do I put it, you're just living life to live life. Like you're living to have fun, but you're not actually working. And not everybody can, what's it called, not everybody can live that life. And it's kind of like, if you're not doing that, then you're failing. And I feel like that's how society kind of judges people, is that it moves from different trends. Like it's constantly moving this goalpost where if you don't fit into this, then you're failing. Once you reach that, suddenly it's another thing. I would say that comes from knowing yourself, knowing your values, and knowing what you want. Sometimes we see things in society and we see them and we're like, oh, this is amazing. And just because it's amazing, we think that that's what's for us. I feel like when you come into yourself, when you realize like, okay, these are my values, these are my principles, this is who I want to be and where I want to be, what society says tends to matter less. And in that sense, you can, overcome that. I think this is common in a lot of African cultures as well. Your public life is supposed to be all good. Everything is supposed to be amazing. There's supposed to be nothing shameful, nothing scandalous. Everything is supposed to be good. You're supposed to be happy. Whereas in your private life, that's where your real struggles are. You're taught to hide your struggles and just anything bad that comes up, whether it be relationships or situations. And the sad reality about these two lives is that everybody has them. And when you are in your sadness and in your private life and you come out in the public, it's like everybody else just seems to have that public life. And that's just not the reality. It's like everybody else has their own struggles as well. And yeah, it's a common experience, but I think we always forget that that people actually do go through things. Even if you look at some of like your friends, even certain celebrities, it may seem like everything is great, and then you actually speak to them and you see like, oh wow, I don't want your life. Like your life is complicated as hell. Like I have my problems and your problems are just too much for me. And that's just the reality. Is like we have this mask because of, I guess, shame. We're taught to always hide shame, and therefore in our public life we do everything to avoid that shame. And I think that's generally why they exist in the realities of that. I think it goes back to knowing yourself and your values and living by principles. I think because we're already as old as we are, we're already conditioned to have both private and public lives. I feel like the way you can sync them more is to abide by the same principles and values in your private life and public life. And privacy should more be in the sense of how vulnerable you are, instead of having a completely different personality. You know what I mean? It's about bringing both personas, because your public life is not completely fake. It is still you. Your public life does not mirror anybody else's. It's still something that comes from you. So it's about taking that part of the public and your private and putting them together and finding, the common ground between them and living and abiding by those set principles and values. To this, I have three things to say. The first one being, your journey is not the same as anyone else's. Everybody has different upbringings. They were born in different environments, and therefore comparing yourselves, it's never going to work, because you're never going to have that same experience. And it's about knowing and focusing on where you want to go and who you want to be. The second thing I'd say is you should commit to growth. Because when you're in that state and you're seeing other people who are ahead of you, that can sometimes cripple you. Instead, you should look towards, what you can learn to be who you want to be and where you want to be. Because they've done it. You can do it too if that's what you want to do. And it just takes the commitment and discipline towards growth. And the third thing is that growth is not linear. We have this misconception that we develop and go, and it's like, let's say we take 3 steps forward, and if I take 5 steps back, then it reverses all that growth. And growth is not like that. It's an ongoing process. It never ends. And yeah, just remember that, like, you went 5 steps forward, 3 steps back, it doesn't erase those 5 steps that you went forward. It's because you're different, you've learned something. So yeah, those are my 3 words of encouragement.